You know that feeling when you're walking through someone's yard sale on a quiet Saturday morning, and you pick up an old music box or a vintage photograph, and for just a second, something feels wrong, like the object is heavier than it should be, or colder, or like it's been waiting specifically for you. What I'm about to share with you happened to real people. 9 encounters that started as innocent weekend shopping and ended as something much darker. These aren't urban legends or campfire stories. These are the testimonies of people who discovered that sometimes the things we bring home from yard sales bring something else with them. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why some bargains are far too expensive, no matter how little you pay. Sarah thought she was done with surprises when she moved to that quiet Connecticut town. After her divorce, all she wanted was peace. Her little house on Willow Bend Road felt like the perfect place to start over. Clean slate, fresh beginning. That Saturday in June started like any other yard sale morning. Sarah was clearing out the last reminders of her marriage. Wedding china still wrapped in tissue paper. Picture frames emptied of photos, and a mountain bike her ex-husband had bought during one of his short-lived fitness phases. She priced it at $300. It was worth every penny. The black Dodge Ram appeared around 8 a.m. Even before the woman stepped out, something felt off. The truck was loud, intentionally loud, like it wanted to announce its presence to the entire neighborhood. The woman who emerged was wearing a bright yellow cardigan, odd for a humid June morning. But it wasn't her clothing that made Sarah's skin crawl. It was the way she moved, like she'd already decided what belonged to her. "How much?" the woman asked, pointing at the bike. $300, Sarah replied. The woman laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're not getting more than $40 for that." Now, Sarah had been to plenty of yard sales. She knew haggling was part of the game, but this wasn't haggling. This was something else entirely. The tone wasn't playful or negotiating. It was dismissive, almost insulting. When Sarah stuck to her price, the woman stared at her, not the quick glance of disappointment you'd expect. A long, deliberate stare, like she was memorizing Sarah's face. Then she walked back to her truck, muttered something Sarah couldn't catch, and didn't leave. For the next 10 minutes, Sarah watched the Ram idle across the street. The woman sat behind the wheel, cigarette in hand, just watching Sarah's yard sale. Just watching Sarah. That's when things escalated. Just after 9:30, a man appeared. Broad shoulders, work boots, baseball cap pulled low. He walked straight to the bike like he'd been sent there. "You're gonna take 40 for it, right?" he said. Not a question. A statement. Sarah shook her head. "I've already got offers close to my asking price." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Don't play stubborn. My wife doesn't like being disrespected." The word hit Sarah like a slap. Disrespected? She'd simply stated her price. Then he stepped closer, dropping his voice so only she could hear. "Prices can change real fast when you're scared enough. You think people like you can just..." A couple browsing the dishes turned toward them. The woman pulled out her phone like a weapon. "I'm calling the cops if you don't leave right now." For a long second, nobody moved. Then the man glanced back at the truck, where the yellow cardigan woman was still sitting, cigarette dangling from her fingers. "You'll regret this," he said under his breath and walked away. But here's what Sarah realized later, what she couldn't shake. This wasn't random. They had targeted her specifically. The yellow cardigan woman had been watching, waiting, studying Sarah's reactions before sending in her husband. The rest of the day crawled by. Every car that slowed made Sarah's pulse jump. Every footstep on the sidewalk made her shoulders tighten. She found herself scanning the street more than greeting customers. Around 2 p.m., she saw it again. The black Dodge Ram, parked 2 houses down, angled so the driver had a perfect view of Sarah's yard. The windows were tinted, but Sarah didn't need to see their faces to know who it was. No one got out, no confrontation. Just waiting, watching. The psychological pressure was worse than any direct threat. The truck didn't leave until Sarah started packing up around 3:30. The sound of the engine pulling away should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like someone pulling a knife away only to hide it behind their back. That night, Sarah moved through her house like it was enemy territory. Every lock checked twice, every window examined, every sound analyzed. 3 days later, at the grocery store, Sarah caught a whiff of heavy artificial perfume. Her skin prickled before her brain caught up. Yellow cardigan, walking past the end of the aisle. Sarah never saw the Dodge Ram again, but she never had another yard sale either. She learned something that Saturday that changed how she saw the world. Some people don't just want your things. They want your submission, your fear, your recognition that they have power over you. Sometimes the most dangerous predators don't roar. They haggle. When David's father had the stroke, it changed everything. The man who'd once filled every room with his presence was suddenly small, fragile, his words tangled and slurred. The house on Laurel Drive was a museum of his father's military service. Vietnam, unit photos, National Geographic towers, and the attic, filled with boxes marked his father's sharp handwriting. Most said normal things, Christmas or tools. But a few had darker markings. Do not open. 3 words that had governed David's childhood. His father never explained them, never justified them. They were simply law. Now, with his father in assisted care and the house to be sold, David faced a decision: clean everything out or respect boundaries that might no longer matter. That May morning, David set up tables across the lawn. Kitchen items, tools, spare furniture, everything except what was in those forbidden boxes. The first customer arrived before he'd even finished setting up. A rusty blue station wagon, coughing to a stop, a woman stepping out. Wiry frame, sharp eyes. Windbreaker zipped her chin despite the warm weather. She didn't say hello, didn't browse, just walked up and asked, "Military keepsakes? Anything from overseas?" "My dad served," David said cautiously, "but I'm not selling that stuff." Her smile was thin and strange. Everything has a price. She drifted around without touching much, but when she passed under the attic window, she stopped, looked up, stared just a second too long to be casual. She left without buying anything. But when her station wagon rolled away, David had the strange sense she hadn't actually left. The yard sale proceeded normally for a while. Neighbors, families, the usual weekend browsers. David almost forgot about the woman. Almost. Around 11 a.m., she came back. This time a man, tall, pale, wearing sunglasses despite the shade from the maple trees. They didn't pretend to browse. They went straight toward the side of the house, toward the bulkhead door that led to the attic stairs. "Hey!" David called out. "That's not for customers." The man turned slightly, a faint smile creeping onto his face. "We're just curious. We know what's up there." David's blood went cold. "You don't." The woman tilted her head like a bird watching something small and helpless. "You should be careful what you keep locked away. Things breathe when you shut them in too long." They didn't wait for his reply. They turned and left, walking slow, their footsteps crunching in perfect unison on the gravel. That afternoon, David went inside to grab empty boxes. The attic door was standing open. Just a crack, but open. He hadn't been up there all day. David climbed the stairs slowly. The smell hit him first, dust, wood, and something faintly metallic. The boxes were where he'd left them, except one. The largest box, marked "Do Not Open" in his father's heavy black letters, was gone. In its place was a single piece of paper, block letters, written with a steady hand. "You can't keep it." David searched every corner of the attic. Nothing. He called the police, but what could he tell them? Someone had taken a box he'd never looked inside, left a note, and committed no visible crime. That night, David called his father at the care home. The old man's voice was shaky, not from the stroke this time, but from something else. "Did you open it?" his father asked. "No," David said. "Good." There was a long pause. "Then don't answer if it comes back." For the next few days, David treated the house like it was under siege. Motion sensors, locked doors, constant vigilance. The sensor above the attic hatch went off the second night. David didn't check. Just sat in the living room until morning, every lamp blazing. On the sixth night, David heard something sliding across the attic floor. Heavy, deliberate. This time, he didn't call the police. He grabbed his keys and walked out without looking back. When he returned near midnight, the motion light was still on. The next morning, a box sat on his porch. Smaller than the original, newer, taped shut. His name written in that same block lettering. David drove straight to the dump. Left it there, tape unbroken. The house sold 2 months later. He didn't tell the buyers about the attic. Some families' secrets aren't kept to protect you from the truth. They're kept to protect the truth from you. David kept his father's final promise. Some things are meant to be opened. When Lisa moved to Greenford, she thought she was done with surprises. After a breakup that ended badly enough to leave scars, she wanted life quiet enough that days would blur together peacefully. The house at the end of Maplewood Terrace was perfect for healing. 1 story, yellow siding, the kind of front porch where you could sit for hours with coffee and watch the world slow down. Then her landlord mentioned the community yard sale. "It's good for meeting folks," she said, like that was a selling point. Lisa tried to decline, but apparently her lease agreement encouraged participation in neighborhood events. That Saturday morning was crisp, air carrying the faint sweetness of rotting leaves and golden sunlight. Lisa dragged folding tables under the big maple tree, telling herself it would be business only. Kitchen items, hardcover books her ex had left, vintage cameras that belonged to her father. Quick transactions, minimal interaction, then back to her quiet life. Around 9:30, he appeared. Tall, dark hair, navy sweater over jeans worn naturally, not artificially distressed. One of those open, steady smiles that makes you feel like the only person on the street. His eyes landed on the cameras, and he walked over almost reverently. "These yours?" he asked. "They were my dad's," Lisa said, just storing them away. He picked one up like it was breakable glass. "These deserve someone who will use them." They talked. Not small talk, but the kind that skips weather and goes straight to things you might remember later. His name was Evan. He knew the coast, the trails, the coffee shops that weren't tourist traps. As he left with one of the cameras, he said, "I'll show you what this can do." It sounded like a promise. The rest of the day proceeded normally, but around 5 p.m., as Lisa was folding the last table, she saw him again. Across the street, leaning against a lamppost. When she waved, he didn't wave back, just watched with deliberate stillness. That night at 8:30, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "I think I left something in the camera bag." Signed E. Sensory details, a photograph. Lisa unzipped the bag. Inside was a photo print she hadn't seen before. Black and white, crisp focus. It was her, standing at her own yard sale that morning, head turned toward another customer, completely unaware someone was taking the picture. Lisa stared at the photo for a long time. She didn't reply to the message. The next morning, Lisa opened her front door for the paper and found Evan sitting on her front steps. Paper bag and cardboard tray with 2 cups. "Thought I'd bring breakfast," he said, holding up the coffee. "You seemed lonely yesterday." "How did you know where I live?" Lisa asked, his eyebrows lifted in mock confusion. "I was just here yesterday for the sale." It was a fair point, but something about how he said it, like it was the most natural thing in the world to return uninvited, set her teeth on edge. When Lisa asked if he wanted to see some of his photography work, she mumbled about having a busy day ahead. Later that afternoon, carrying unsold boxes inside, Lisa was halfway through stacking them when Evan appeared in the doorway. "I can help," he said. "I didn't hear you knock." "I didn't," he said, taking a slow step forward. "I don't mind waiting." Lisa stood frozen until he finally stepped back. Another time then, and left without closing the door. That evening, around 10 p.m., Lisa peeked through her living room drapes. Across the street, under the maple tree, a dark figure stood perfectly still. She watched for an hour. He didn't leave. By Sunday morning, Lisa knew she couldn't stay. When she opened the door to leave, there was another photo on the porch, this time showing her looking straight into the camera from the yard sale. Lisa never went back to that house. Never saw Evan again. But every time she walks down a tree-lined street, she glances at the shadows, half expecting to see him there. Attention can feel flattering, especially when you've been lonely, but not all attention is safe. The wrong person can turn an ordinary moment into something you carry for years. Trust your instincts. They're usually right. When Tom and his brother Ethan ended up sharing a two-bedroom apartment after their parents' explosive divorce, neither of them expected to stay long. The place on the east side of Maplewood Heights was temporary. Carpet that never looked clean, neighbors arguing just out of sight. Most of Tom's belongings were still in boxes against his bedroom wall. He kept telling himself he'd unpack once things settled, but settled felt like fantasy. That humid Saturday morning in June, the air was sticky and oppressive. The ceiling fans felt useless. Tom decided a walk might help. The cardboard sign was bleeding black marker. Yard sale. Everything must go. An arrow pointing towards Cedar Lane. The sale was squeezed between overgrown lawns, boxes spilling onto cracked sidewalk. What caught Tom's eye was a trunk, antique wooden, carvings worn smooth by time. His grandmother had owned something similar. Cedar smell, old wool blankets, echoes of something familiar. The woman running the sale was in her 70s, wiry but graceful. When Tom asked about the trunk, her hand hesitated. It's not really for sale. Some things are better left untouched. But Tom pressed gently, and after a moment, she shrugged. "Be careful with it," she murmured as he handed over $10. Back at the apartment, Tom and Ethan set the trunk against the wall in Tom's room. That evening, Tom couldn't resist opening it. Inside, stacks of old photographs, letters brown at the edges, and a small music box with inlaid mother of pearl. When Tom wound the box, a soft, delicate tune began to play. But there was something beneath the melody, at first like static, but the longer he listened, the more it sounded like whispers. Low, urgent, almost pleading. The shadows in his room seemed longer than they should have been, reaching toward the trunk. Over the next few days, small things began happening. The music box would play when Tom hadn't touched it. Faint laughter, quick and light, even when he was alone. Movement in his peripheral vision in the hallway, but when he turned, nothing. One night, Tom Googled Callahan Trunk, Oregon, the name from old envelopes in the box. Buried among genealogy pages was a thread from a local forum about incidents in the 1970s. No details, just rumors about disappearances in the Cedar Lane neighborhood. Tom shut the laptop. It was ridiculous. Old furniture didn't carry ghosts. But he didn't sleep well that night. Wednesday afternoon, folding laundry in his room, Tom heard slow, deliberate steps overhead, boards creaking under weight. They didn't have an attic. The building was 3 floors. They were on the top. Above them was only roof. "Ethan!" Tom called. "What?" "You hear that?" Ethan frowned, listened, then shook his head. "You're jumpy. Lay off the horror movies." That night, Tom woke to the music box again. The tune was slower, dragging like it was being pulled underwater. Whispers filled the spaces between notes, angry now and close. When he switched on the lamp, the trunk's lid was open. He hadn't left it that way. By Friday, Tom decided to return the trunk. He and Ethan walked back to Cedar Lane that evening. The house was gone. Not empty, gone. In its place was a freshly mulched lot, a narrow driveway leading to nothing. "Wrong street?" Ethan asked. "No," Tom said, his throat dry. "It was here." Weeks passed. Tom tried to treat the trunk like ordinary furniture. But late at night, music drifted through the apartment. The shadows still moved wrong. Some curiosities aren't worth satisfying. History doesn't always want to be uncovered, and not every story is yours to finish. Tom kept the trunk closed now, a blanket thrown over it. But deep down, he knew whatever had been in that attic, whatever that attic was here with him now. When something feels wrong, listen. The past has a way of following you home. There's something about the quiet parts of the city that feels heavier than the noise. When Maya moved to the Riverside Park neighborhood of Columbus, She was still trying to adjust to that particular kind of silence. Fresh out of college, working at a small marketing firm, emails at copy endless coffee runs. Her life had all the color of wet cardboard, but it paid for her shoebox studio and kept her from moving back with her parents. Saturday mornings became Maya's escape from autopilot existence. Farmers markets, pop-up art fairs, yard sales, anything that might shake her out of her routine. The sign was bright orange, impossible to miss. Yard sale, rare items, followed by an address Maya didn't recognize, 27 Elm Street. The street was narrow, lined with maples, older homes set back from the curb. Number 27 was tucked behind brick townhouses, almost like it was hiding. The yard sale was strange, not cluttered or messy. Every item placed deliberately on tables or shelves. Vinyl records, hardcover books, jewelry. And then there was the doll. She sat alone on a wooden crate, porcelain skin dulled by dust, once white dress torn at the hem, blue glass eyes that seemed fixed on Maya, sharp and unblinking. The man running the sale was older, silver hair, sharpness in his gaze that didn't soften when he smiled. "Careful with her," he said quietly, noticing Maya's attention. "She's special. Some people don't take her lightly." Maya tried to laugh it off. "Special how?" He didn't answer, just turned and began rearranging records. Maya should have walked away, but she'd been craving something unusual, something to break the endless cycle of work, eat, sleep, repeat. "How much?" she asked. He hesitated, then held up 10 fingers. When he handed Maya the doll, the porcelain felt oddly cold against her palms, despite the warm September morning. On the walk back, the streets felt unusually empty. Maya caught herself glancing over her shoulder, certain someone was following, but there was never anyone there. Maya set the doll on her kitchen counter, planning to clean her up the next morning. That night, scrolling through her phone with the TV on, she heard it around 11:30, a faint, drawn-out creak, the kind of sound it makes when weight shifts. When Maya looked toward the kitchen, the doll was no longer facing forward. She was turned toward the doorway, glass eyes angled directly at Maya. Maya's stomach tightened. She hadn't touched the doll since setting her down. By Wednesday, Maya stopped trying to explain it. Every day, the doll was somewhere else. Windowsill, couch arm, once even on Maya's desk when she came home from work. Always facing her, always watching. The worst part wasn't the movement. It was the feeling that came with it, a prickling at the back of Maya's neck, like the air itself was being watched. Maya stopped inviting people over. Didn't want to explain why a doll kept appearing in different places like some sick game of hide and seek. The dream started next. Maya would lie in bed and hear soft patter of feet across the floor, tiny, deliberate. The doll would appear beside her bed, mouth moving in whispers Maya couldn't understand. Always urgent, always angry. One rainy Thursday, Maya found a crumpled yard sale flyer and called a number. After several rings, a gravelly voice answered. "Mr. Whitaker, I bought a doll from you. I think there's something wrong with it." The line went dead. The next morning, Maya went back to 27 Elm Street. The house was nothing like she remembered. Boarded windows, peeling paint, sagging porch like it had been abandoned for years. A neighbor across the street called out, "You looking for someone?" "Mr. Whitaker, the man who lives here." The neighbor frowned. No one's lived there since 2009. Old man Whitaker died at least 15 years ago. Maya moved apartments 2 months later, convincing herself a fresh space would fix things. The doll came with her. Maya told herself she couldn't just throw away porcelain and cloth. But some nights Maya wakes to faint laughter in the dark, or whispers that seem to come from inside her ear. The air turns cold and she feels the weight of those glass eyes, even when she keeps her own closed. Maya stopped looking directly at the doll. It feels like a dare she'd lose. Some things are better left where you found them. Curiosity can blur into invitation, and not every presence that follows you home means you well. The doll is still there, always facing Maya, always watching. Some mornings feel heavier than others, like the air itself has something to say if you just stand still long enough to hear it. That Sunday morning in early July had that kind of weight for Jack and Sophie. They'd made the choice to downsize, swapping their cramped city apartment for a modest townhouse in Willow Creek. It should have been a fresh start. Instead, it felt like an escape they weren't ready to admit to themselves. Sophie was reeling from losing her job. Jack was learning to live with jittery aftershocks from a car accident that had left him with bruises that healed faster than his nerves. Jack walked to get away from his own head. A few blocks from home, he spotted the sign, "Yard Sale, Rare Treasures." The phrase hooked him. Most sales were just unwanted clothes and mismatched mugs. The sale was busy, people milling around antique lamps and kitchenware. Jack wandered until he noticed something half-hidden under a table piled with quilts. A wooden chest, the kind you'd expect at the foot of someone's bed a century ago. Surface scuffed and scarred, brass lock mottled with rust, keyhole staring back like an unblinking eye. The woman behind the table, short, gray-haired, wearing a faded floral dress, stepped closer when Jack crouched for a better look. "Not sure that's something you'd want," she said. "Is it for sale?" She hesitated. "It's better if it stays closed." Jack smiled. "I was thinking I could restore it, maybe use it as a coffee table." Her gaze lingered a moment longer, then she sighed. "If you insist, $20. When Jack lifted the chest, he was surprised by the weight, far heavier than it should have been, as though it carried more than just wood and metal. That evening, Jack and Sophie decided to see what was inside. The rusted latch gave with a reluctant click after Sophie wedged a screwdriver into the keyhole. The lid creaked as Jack lifted it, and a cool draft seemed to rise from the dark inside. "Did you feel that?" Sophie asked. Inside was a stack of envelopes tied with fraying twine, black and white photographs curled at the edges, and a folded piece of parchment, a hand-drawn map. The letters were written in cramped, hurried handwriting. The first one began without greeting. "Do not ignore what's in the walls. It waits and it watches. Never stay in the dark alone." Half warnings, half confessions. Mentions of betrayal. Something that moved when the house was still. Sophie frowned the photographs, all of a single house from different angles. In every shot, the windows seemed dark, curtains drawn. "This is creepy," she said, tossing them back. The map was hand-drawn with street names in old-fashioned cursive. Their neighborhood wasn't on it, but Jack could see where Willow Creek would be now. A small X was marked in the attic of one house. That night, as they settled into bed, Jack heard the faint creak of footsteps on the stairs. He thought Sophie had gotten up, but when he turned, she was beside him, sound asleep. The noise came again, 2 deliberate steps, then silence. The next morning, Sophie mentioned seeing a tall shadow in the hallway, just before bed, like someone standing there watching. They laughed it off at breakfast, but neither finished their coffee. The following days carried a strange edge. The chest sat in the corner, like an uninvited guest neither wanted to acknowledge. Wednesday night, Jack came downstairs for water. The house was quiet, but the air felt colder. The chest lid was open by an inch. He was certain they had closed it. 2 nights later, sitting on the couch, a dull thump sounded from upstairs. "That came from the attic," Sophie whispered. Jack climbed into the rarely used attic space. Sweeping his flashlight across beams and insulation, he saw a narrow wooden panel that didn't match the rest. Behind it, more letters in oilcloth and a small tin box with a brass key. The letters were older, same frantic handwriting but faded. Several mentioned Daniel Cormick with phrases like, "He knows where hides," and "He sealed it, but not well enough." Jack found an old news article from 1974 about Daniel Cormick, found dead in his attic under unexplained circumstances after neighbors reported strange smells and sounds. "I think we should get rid of the chest," Sophie said that evening. Jack wanted to agree, but the mystery had its hooks in him. It wasn't just about the chest anymore. It was about what tied it to their attic, to those letters. At 2 a.m., Jack woke to something sliding across the floor downstairs. The chest was no longer in the corner. It was sitting in the middle of the living room. "Why did you move it?" Sophie asked, appearing at the top of the stairs. I didn't, Jack said. The chest sat between them and the front door, as if blocking their way out. The next morning, Sophie packed a bag. I'm done chasing whatever this is. I'm staying at my sister's. Jack watched her walk out, the weight of her leaving heavier than the chest ever could be. That evening, Jack sat with the letters spread across the coffee table. The brass key sat beside them, cold against his palm. He lifted the chest lid again, found a false bottom he hadn't noticed before. The key slid into a small lockbox perfectly. Inside were more letters with neater handwriting, almost resigned. They spoke of keeping the thing contained, warning anyone who finds this to resist opening it. The final letter ended mid-sentence, ink smeared as if the writer had been interrupted. The room seemed darker, even though the lamps were on. Jack's ears rang with a low hum like a distant engine. That night, he dreamed of a man standing in the corner of his bedroom. When he woke, the chest was at the foot of his bed. 2 days later, Jack rented a storage unit on the far side of town. He moved the chest there and left it in the farthest corner. The townhouse was quieter afterward, but every so often late at night, Jack still heard faint creaks in the hallway. Some mysteries promise answers, but carry only weight. Curiosity can root itself in your life until it takes more than you bargained for. Not every locked thing is meant to be opened. Sometimes walking away is the only way to keep what matters from slipping away. The house sold 2 months later. Jack didn't tell the buyers about the chest, but sometimes he wonders if it's still where he left it. Small towns have a way of stretching time. In Brookfield Hollow, days drifted slow enough that you notice leaves changing one shade at a time. Marcus had been staying at his Uncle Mark's place for a year after losing his job in Boston. What was supposed to be temporary had become indefinite, his bank account shrinking while his resume gathered digital dust. Yard sales became Marcus's weekend habit, a mix of necessity and escape. He couldn't afford much, but there was something comforting about walking through someone else's memories. That bright, cool Saturday morning, Marcus spotted a sign. Yard sale. Vintage goods. The driveway curved, opening into a yard with folding tables. A woman named Teresa stood arranging typewriters, giving Marcus a polite nod without calling out. That's when he saw it. A vintage Polaroid camera, half hidden on a low shelf. Leather strap cracked, edges scuffed, but the body was solid. The kind of weight that suggested it could survive being dropped downstairs. Does it work? Marcus asked. Teresa hesitated, her gaze flicking toward the camera. Works in its own way. The answer was vague enough to feel rehearsed. Marcus handed her the money, and she placed the camera in a paper bag without small talk or explanation. Back at his uncle's place, Marcus found expired Polaroid film from months ago. The kitchen was small and warm with low sunlight spilling through curtains. He aimed at the far wall, pressed the shutter, and the machine came alive with a deep mechanical whir. When the image developed, Marcus's stomach tightened. It wasn't the empty kitchen he'd aimed at. A young boy stood by the window, hands in the pockets of old-fashioned trousers, white shirt buttoned to the collar, hair neatly combed, expression unreadable. There had been no one in the kitchen. Marcus took another photo outside, aiming at the porch. The developed picture showed his uncle sitting in his old rocker, cigarette in hand. But Uncle Mark looked much younger, and he hadn't smoked in over a decade. That evening, Marcus showed Uncle Mark the photos. His expression went stiff. "That's not possible," Mark muttered, not looking Marcus in the eye. "What do you think it means?" Mark shook his head, busying himself with fishing gear. Some things aren't meant to be messed with. Get rid of it. But Marcus was hooked. Over the next few days, he tested the camera in different rooms. Each photo was a window to another time. The living room with 1980s furniture. The front yard with a 1950s car instead of his uncle's truck. Thursday night, Marcus decided to try something different. In his bedroom, he aimed the camera at his own reflection in the mirror. The developed photo showed him from 10 years ago, sitting on a bed in an apartment from his 20s. Shorter hair, different clothes, somehow happier. The thought crossed his mind. If it can show the past, maybe it can show the future. Friday night, Marcus closed his curtains, switched on the bedside lamp, and aimed the lens at his room, pressing the shutter and waiting. When the image came into focus, the breath left his lungs. His bedroom, same walls, same lamp, but he was lying in bed with eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. A dark figure loomed over him, barely human, leaning close as if whispering. In the bottom corner, a timestamp. October 8th, 2019. 3 days from now. Marcus didn't sleep that night or the next. When October 8th arrived, he locked his bedroom door, turned on every light, and sat upright with the camera in his lap. Hours passed. The clock hit midnight, and the light flickered. Something shifted in the air, subtle but sharp, like pressure before a storm. Marcus felt movement at the foot of his bed, but couldn't make himself look. The camera, still in his hands, suddenly clicked on its own. The picture slid out. Marcus hasn't developed that photo, and he's not sure he ever will. The undeveloped photo sat on his desk for days, face down like a secret he couldn't decide to hear or keep buried. Uncle Mark noticed his jumpiness. "You look like you've been through something." "I think I have," Marcus muttered. Marcus waited until evening, turned off the lights, and sat at the desk. He shook the photo gently, watching the image slowly form. It was him, lying in bed exactly as in the earlier photo. But now the shadow wasn't leaning over him. It was sitting beside him, outlined sharper, as if it had decided to stay. The camera went into a box in the attic, buried under old coats. But Marcus still hears the click, sometimes at night, even when he's not holding it. A week later, Marcus caught himself avoiding mirrors, afraid the shadow might be standing there. The camera didn't just show the past or future. It showed truths you weren't ready for. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. Some doors stay closed for a reason. The need to know could be stronger than fear, but once you uncover certain truths, they can't be put back. Curiosity might lead you to discovery, but sometimes it leads you somewhere you can never come back from. Hit that subscribe button, because there are more stories out there, more warnings that went unheeded, more people who learned too late that some things are better left on someone else's table. The next yard sale you visit might look perfectly normal. The sellers might seem friendly. The prices might be reasonable. But remember these 9 stories. Remember that not every transaction ends when money changes hands. Some things follow you home. Some bargains keep charging interest. And some yard sales never really end. Sweet dreams.